Hi, everyone. Welcome back. We're here with another presenter interview. We are so thrilled to have Rosalyn Eves here to introduce her course and to get to know her a little bit better. We're here with Carmen Chestnut as well, and we are so excited that you took the time to come and meet with us, Rosalyn. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
Absolutely. Do you want to just start and give us a little bit about yourself and what you do in the publishing world?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So I am primarily a writer. I write young adult novels. I have four out currently and another one coming out next year. And they're all historical, some historical fantasy, some straight up historical. So I really enjoy the research element. But I also teach freshman composition, or I teach composition classes at university, both freshman and sophomore level classes. So I kind of come at this both from a writer and from a teacher perspective.
It's fabulous. And it comes across in your presentation at Author Capital. Your presentation is absolutely fabulous. So thank you so much for sharing that. And we're so excited to present it to all of our attendees as well. So thank you. If you, as the viewer, are interested in sharing this with somebody who is interested in learning more about character development, that's what we're covering today. Go ahead and hit share and send it to a friend because Rosalyn has some really fabulous tips and outlook at character building and evoking emotion. So go ahead and hit share. But Karma, do you want to go ahead and start off with our first interview question?
Absolutely. Yeah, so Rosalyn, if you could tell us about what you're teaching at Author Capital and how you discovered and fell in love with this topic.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I think it came from a couple things. One is that as a writer, honestly, layering an emotion is something that I have to do consciously. It doesn't come naturally for me. But it also came from several years ago. I was at a conference and Martine Levitt, I don't know if you're familiar with her books, but she's a fantastic teacher and writer. And she was talking about something completely different. And she had this kind of throwaway line where she said something, I'm so tired of like hearts beating and stomachs clenching. And she's like, we need to do better, find better ways to describe emotion. And she said, go look up the objective correlative. That'll teach you how to do this. And then she moved on and I was stuck there going, wait, the what? And so after the conference presentation, I went and I looked up the objective correlative and I honestly couldn't find very much. And so that kind of sent me on a deep dive to try and put together, what is this? How does this principle work? And I wrote up a blog post and then I did a couple presentations on it. And so like just over time, I gradually added to the way I understand it and to how I present it. But honestly, of all the things I presented on, this is the one that I still years later get people going, that was so helpful. And it was really helpful for me too, because like I said, when I sat down to try and find information online about the objective correlative, I wasn't finding a ton of information. And so a lot of this was just me pulling together what I had or what I could find.
Well, I really appreciate that you're making it more accessible because that's kind of the goal, is to help other writers use these tools. I mean, there's no secrets, right, in the writing community. And so, but there are a lot of things that aren't explored. And so when you had introduced this, I didn't know what it was either. So when you pitched the class, I was like, I want to learn about this. This is huge. And it's been very helpful for me as an author to watch your courses and learn more about this. So thank you for gathering all this information and making it concise and helpful. I'm really excited to see what this does for authors. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So I have a question. When it comes to writing emotion, what do you feel like are the biggest struggles or mistakes that authors make when they're diving into this world of trying to express emotion on the page?
Yeah, like I mentioned before, this is something that I also struggle with. So when I teach this, it's more of I'm learning this too because I need it, not because I think I'm an expert who has all this information to do. But I think one of the biggest mistakes that writers often make is not trusting their readers. I think sometimes, especially for big emotional moments, we really want to make sure the readers don't miss it. And sometimes we end up hitting them over the head with all of the detail and being very explicit about what's going on. And most readers are smarter than we give them credit for sometimes.
Right.
So like for me, at least when I'm writing, especially writing a remote emotion, I often have to go back to scenes and cut out explicit descriptions of what the characters are feeling and think more about how can I show this? How can I set the stage? How can I use description and mood to evoke that emotion rather than just, hitting readers over the head with what the character is supposed to be feeling? So that to me, I think is one of the biggest mistakes that people make, is just not trusting readers to pick up on all of the different clues that you're putting into the story.
Okay. So with that piece of advice in mind, then what do you think is a great tool or tactic that can help authors get writing emotion right and not bash the readers over the head with it?
I mean, for me, the most helpful thing, honestly, has been kind of twofold. One is looking at the books I love and looking at the really emotional moments and looking at how did they do this? Because usually it takes a lot of work. Usually it's not just in that scene. Usually it's the buildup of the whole book to get to that scene. Kelly Lloyd Gilbert is fantastic at this. And when I've done pretty much every presentation I've done on this has included some of her books. But that's been really helpful for me, is looking at how other writers do this, but then also kind of tapping into my own experience. When I'm feeling afraid, what do I do? When friends of mine are feeling afraid, what do they do? Like, some people retreat. I have, even just looking at the people close to me, I have one kid who, when they are scared or nervous, gets very angry. And I have another kid who, when they are scared and nervous, they dissolve into tears and they go hide. Right. And so I think just looking at how the people around you respond to things and thinking about how you can show that in your work is helpful as well.
I love that. And I also love that in your class, you're giving us some tools of look for this, or pointing out the principle behind it and then showing us that example, so that then we can become better readers ourselves and recognize, because sometimes when we're not aware, we read it and go, I love this. Why does this work? I don't understand.
Right.
So you're giving us that marriage of both of those pieces so that we can become a better reader. We can read like a writer. So I love that about your course, that you share those examples as well. And I'm going to have to go check out that author, because I love your book. So whatever you love, I'm pretty sure I would also love as well.
She's such a beautiful writer. I'm always amazed when I read her books.
Oh, that's awesome. All right. So next, I know that people might be feeling unsure about, how do I even start changing the way I talk about emotion or the way I present emotion to my readers. So how can learning about this topic help those readers and writers start to navigate this differently, or change in the way they present emotion?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think when I think of things like the objective correlative, I think of them as a tool in a toolkit. Like, you're not going to use the same tool every single time, but I think the more tools you have at your disposal, the more different ways you have to weave things in, and often the better and richer your work can be. And so I would never say that the objective correlative is the only way to put emotion into the work. It's just been a tool that I've found helpful to think about. But it's also, like any other tool, it can be overdone. One of the things I mentioned in the presentation is that this isn't something you want to do for every single moment in your book. This is really a tool for enhancing the really big emotional moments where you want to make sure that that emotion is coming through for the reader. So I think part of it is just learning about different tools and then trying them out. See what works for you. Not every tool is going to work for every author. Something that I would love to explore but haven't done much of yet is just how things like neurodivergence affect this too, because I've also seen some neurodivergent writers say that the advice of show, don't tell doesn't always work for people, because some people need it to be explicit. And so the more I learn about stuff, the more I think, really, you want a variety of tools. You don't want to always be doing the same thing. So part of it is just, learn something new and try it. If you're not super confident about it, try it in a small scene where it's not going to make or break the scene until you get confident in what you're doing, and then you can apply it to bigger and bigger moments.
Oh, that's a great consideration. I love that.
Absolutely. And I love that you're, like you even pointed out, we're giving you tools, because not all writers write the same. Not all readers read the same. So it's more just knowing your options and developing all of these different skills so you can be a stronger writer. So you're teaching this fantastic course at Author Capital. Can you give us a really short breakdown of what you're covering, and maybe for everyone who doesn't know, like a very simple definition of what is the objective correlative, just so we can understand your course?
Yeah, so the objective correlative is, the term itself goes back to T.S. Eliot. Most people know him from his poetry, but he was also a literary critic. And in one of his pieces, I think it was about Hamlet, he was trying to explain how emotion works in drama or in stories. And he said that you have something, you have an object or a situation or a chain of events that, when they are explored to their fullest extent, culminate in a feeling for the reader. And so what he was interested in, I think of this as moving beyond show, don't tell, because it's not even showing necessarily, it's setting up a scene in a way, or describing a scene in a way that makes the reader feel along with the character. So we're not showing them what the character's feeling, we're not telling them what the character's feeling, we're helping them feel with the character. And so the objective correlative is just a series of techniques that allow you to do that. And that can be, one of the things that I talk about is using an object in the story, something that has personal or symbolic value to the character in the story. Like a classic example is Tennessee Williams' The Glass Menagerie, if people are familiar with that. In it, there's a young woman who's a little bit emotionally naive, who collects these glass animals. And I don't think it's a spoiler to say that at the crisis of the story, where something really pivotal happens to this character, something also happens to these glass animals that she values so strongly. And you have this visceral reaction to it, because throughout the play, you've seen how these objects, how they matter to the character. If you think about Lord of the Rings, I think the one ring has the same kind of function. When Frodo is finally able to get rid of the ring, we feel that relief because we know what the weight was of that ring. We've seen it. So that's one way. Another way is using description and setting to create a mood where characters, again, feel with characters, where readers feel with the character based on the kinds of descriptions that you use. And I give some examples of this in the story as well. I think movement and gesture, this is a little bit more along the lines of showing, but I think often the way a character moves through a page, the physical gestures can say a lot about what the character is feeling without coming right out and saying this character was angry, or I think you can be subtle with that. And then the last thing that I talk about is just using sensory details. And obviously we talk about sight and color, but there's a lot about sound or smell or touch that can evoke emotion in the readers. And a lot of these examples, what I love about the examples that I found is a lot of them are really subtle. Like, it's not until you go back and look at what's happening that you're like, oh, I see why it made me feel the way I felt when I read this. And it's subtle enough that you might not pick up on it when you go through the first time. So that's mostly what my class is about different ways that you can approach the objective correlative and how to use it in your writing.
I love that, because each of those things made me think, wow, that's taking the emotion outside of the character. We're no longer contained within the character anymore. It's spilling out into the world, into its environment and everything it interacts with. So that's really, really interesting, and something I definitely need to improve on myself. So I'm excited to come and really try to apply that. So thank you. I am thrilled to take your course and hope everybody else is equally. And then finally, I just wanted to know, as you've said you've been applying this and learning it for yourself, how has this changed you and your writing as you've earned this skill, as you've developed this yourself?
Yeah, I think it has made me more conscious of emotion, for one thing. I know when I first got started writing, and even still now sometimes, my first drafts tend to be very plot focused, and so character growth and emotion is something I have to layer in later. And I will often have critique partners say something like, this big thing happened to this character, and they didn't react to it at all. They just went on with the plot. And so like, it's made me a lot more conscious about slowing down, but also like how to build in those moments. And it's let me play with things in some interesting ways. My most recent book, Beyond the Mapped Stars, is about, it's a coming of age story of a young woman around the time of the 1878 eclipse. And this is a young woman who is struggling between like her individual ambitions and what her family and community expect of her, and her religious belief and her interest in science. And so one of the ways I played with that tension of religious belief and science was I used an objective correlative in the form of the weather because she's always looking at the sky. And so her relationship to science is encapsulated by her daytime descriptions. So when she's feeling really connected and sure of herself, it's usually a clear day and the sun is shining. When she's not as sure of her scientific thing, it's often cloudy or windy, but the same thing is true at night, right? And the night represents her religious faith. So that when that is clearest to her, it's this beautiful night sky that she feels connected with the whole universe. When she's not as sure, the night's cloudy, she can't see anything. And this ended up being really cool because the key point of the story is this eclipse that she gets to witness. And what happens during the eclipse? We have the sun and the moon, you have the night and the daytime sky merged in the same place. And so it let her, like this tension that was all the way through the book, it let her bring those two things to a head and help her find her epiphany. So it lets you do some really cool things with the story that I'm guessing most readers aren't even aware that that's happening in the story. But I think it builds to a really nice emotional moment for the character.
Oh, that gave me goosebumps just hearing about it. That sounds incredible. And I know you've obviously pulled it off well. I've read your other books. I have yet to read this one, but I know it just recently won a Whitney Award. So congratulations. That is a huge accomplishment.
Got two.
Wow, two Whitney Awards.
Yeah, because it got the best youth novel too. So.
Oh my goodness. Congratulations. That is fabulous. And I'm so thrilled for you because obviously you deserve it. You're a wonderful presenter, a wonderful author. So yes, I was very happy to see that for you.
I was really thrilled too. Category, so
good. Well, Rosalyn, thank you so much for coming for this interview. We are just thrilled to be at your feet, learning this from you. And seriously, you are fabulous.
I just want to stress that I am still learning these things too. So I think of this more as we're learning this together than as me pouring forth knowledge, because that makes me feel comfortable.
Well, thank you for paving the way at least, so we can follow in your footsteps, right? That. Yes, awesome. Well, if you are watching this, listening to this, please feel free to come check out Rosalyn's course at the Author Capital Conference. She has a whole hour's worth of content for you to come and dive deep into this objective correlative with emotion and improve your writing through that. So again, thank you, Rosalyn, and we will see you at the conference.